Now to the top story of the day, the passing of Congressman John Lewis. As you know, he was a civil rights icon, and as his colleagues called him throughout his 33 years in the House of Representatives, the conscience of the Congress. He represented Atlanta, Georgia, but one could argue that his constituency was disadvantaged Americans of all stripes, wherever they lived. He'd always been outspoken in his pursuit of justice, and notably, Lewis pushed his colleagues to pass the Voting Rights Advancement Act of 2019 to fight voter suppression and restore the Voting Rights Act, which Lewis marched for in 1965. Here's how he described the bill last year.
There are forces in America today trying to take us back to another time and to another period. We've come too far and made too much progress to go back. With this piece of legislation, we will continue to go forward.
I want to bring in Democratic Congresswoman Terri Sewell of Alabama. She represents the city of Selma, where Lewis marched. She also introduced the Voting Rights Advancement Act, and she is the first elected black woman from Alabama. Congresswoman, thank you for being with us this morning. I want to start with your thoughts. You knew John Lewis very well.
You know, we lost one of our moral compasses, the world did, in the passing of John Lewis. I'm so honored to not only call him colleague, but to call him dear friend. He was a living legend. I grew up in Selma, Alabama, and I now have the opportunity to represent Selma and Montgomery and Birmingham, Alabama's civil rights district in Congress. It's often hard to put into words how blessed I felt to be able to get to thank the person who I owe my very political existence to. So many African-American elected officials do. But he was such a humble man. I have so many wonderful memories of him coming back time and time again to Selma, Alabama, to walk across that bridge, as he said, one more time. Even in the midst of his struggle with pancreatic cancer, he came back just this past March for the 55th anniversary of that Selma to Montgomery march. And he gave us a charge. That charge lives on. He said that we must keep our eyes on the prize, and we must continue to fight for equality and justice. He did that in everything that he did and pursued. He often lended his name and his voice to so many causes for justice. He's planted lots of seeds, as they say, and so we must make sure that we rededicate ourselves to his life's work. We have much work to do. Voting rights should not be partisan, but it's become partisan. I really hope and pray that we can come together, Republicans and Democrats, and really restore the full protections of the Voting Rights Act. That's what John would want.
What needs to be done now? The act, for all intents and purposes, is ready to go. It's sitting on Mitch McConnell's desk.
That's right. We passed it in December, and you showed John's speech, as we pass H.R. 4, the Voting Rights Advancement Act. We just really called upon our senators to take that bill and take it up, and the president to pass it. What a befitting tribute to John and his legacy. John was about the cause of equality and justice for all. And when we think about the unrest on the streets of America and across this nation, it's calling out for the love, the peace, and the equality, the equity that John's life stood for. He truly was a beacon of hope, a light of love in the face of atrocity and violence. He preached it, he lived it each and every day. My heart is full of wonderful memories of John, from the 50th anniversary, being able to introduce him as he introduced President Barack Obama right in front of that bridge. It was critically important to me and to the legacy of my district that we restore the Voting Rights Act and its full protections, and that includes federal oversight. Now more than ever, we need it. And now more than ever, John's light shines. And hopefully we can rededicate ourselves to his memory and to his cause.
Congresswoman Sewell, you make another point. It's not as big as the Voting Rights Act, but it is about that bridge that you keep referring to, the bridge that is seared into the memory of Americans. Most Americans know the name, but if you don't know the name, you know the bridge because you've seen the images of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. I don't know if everybody can remember who Edmund Pettus is, but he was a member of the KKK.
Yes, he was. And, you know, in this time when we are talking about removing Confederate generals and namings, everything has to be on the table, including the name of the bridge. You know, as a representative of Selma, I understand the complicated history that is Selma, Alabama, where we have civil rights and civil war living side by side. He was also a U.S. Senator. And so my community is having very tough conversations about what to do about the naming of that bridge. And I just want to reiterate that I can't think of a better name than that of John Lewis. You know, but that's a community discussion, not something to be cited by me. But I want us to remember, as the legacy of John Lewis, the light of love and the triumph of love over hate that is his life's work. And he had sowed that seed in so many of us. He's a beacon of hope. We called him the conscience of the Congress. I was just so honored to get to know him. As I said, growing up in Selma, Alabama, as a daughter of Brown Chapel AME Church, where the marchers led that march from Selma to Montgomery. I've been a lifelong member of that church. I've gotten a chance to sit and witness not only John, but Reverend C.T. Vivian and so many of the other freedom fighters, but to have an opportunity to serve in Congress with John was such an honor. And to learn from him, to sit at his feet and to learn about the humility, the grace by which he carried himself, a humble boy growing up in Troy, Alabama, in the midst of segregated South. He was a daughter. He was a son of Alabama, and we mourn his loss. Selma mourns his loss. But most importantly, we are inspired and reinvigorated and rededicated to his life's work. We are going to see the Voting Rights Act fully restored. I sat with John as we watched oral arguments in the Supreme Court in the Shelby versus Holder decision. I walked with John as we walked across that bridge on the 50th anniversary of Barack Obama. I walked with John just a few months ago on the 55th anniversary. John's commitment, his tireless efforts in the midst of his own personal health challenges as an inspiration for all of us. He stands as that inspiration. He will continue to be that beacon of hope. And we will continue to march towards that beloved community. He believed in it so fervently. We will keep the faith. We will keep the march and keep the promise that is America that John so desperately believed in.
Congresswoman, thanks for your memories of him and the work that you're doing. And thank you for continuing to remind our viewers that we lost C.T. Vivian this week as well. We have lost two major leaders of the civil rights movement. Representative Terri Sewell of Alabama. Thank you, ma'am, for being with us.